sports fans, thank you so very much for checking out the Sportsline Podcast. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Folks, our audience is growing, and we certainly appreciate the likes, the views, and direct messages you've been sending. Please remember to tell your pals, share your favorite conversation shorts, and remember to subscribe because we appreciate it. Today on the pod, a local who's very passionate about local news and sports and now has the knowledge and power to make very important decisions at a network level. Over 2 decades, this Guelph University grad has stacked himself with experience as an editor, publisher, and journalist covering the broadcasting business, national news, lifestyle, and yes, even sports. Fast forward to 2021, and Greg O'Brien fills some large shoes as the news director right here at CHCH. It's the debut appearance of my boss. Good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Bubba.
You know, there's so much going on in the media business right now, and I got to start right with you because I think of when this event happened, I thought of you. Obviously, it was a really busy day, and I thought at some point we have to have you in on the big news in the sports Canadian broadcasting business. And folks, just 1 week ago, the once dubbed Unholy Alliance came to an end as Bell Media's 37.5% stake in Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, the holding company for the Maple Leafs, Raptors, Toronto FC, and the Toronto Argonauts, were purchased by Rogers Communications for a reported value of $4.7 million. Greg, right at you here. Why is this considered one of the biggest transactions in sports and even Canadian business history?
Well, it's huge. Just look at the numbers, right? It's $4.7 billion for 37.5%. So if you do the math, that's $12.5 billion is what MLSE is valued right now. And then Rogers is going to add the Blue Jays to that, which is another $2.1 billion according to Forbes' valuation of it. And then they're probably going to add the Rogers Center on top of that, which is another $1 billion building, right? Mm-hmm. So we're looking at a $15 billion company right now. You know, so it's huge money for sports, and it consolidates all of it with one company, with one family, the Rogers family.
Would you consider that number, and I know you kind of saying it's a big number, but I went digging, and the Dallas Cowboys, one team, are looking at $9.7 billion. So to have all of these teams in what I would consider the capital of the country, Toronto, did Rogers kind of get off scot-free a little bit here, financially?
The NFL is a bit of a different story, right? Like it's a different stratosphere of teams. Okay. So, you know, it's hard to compare just to the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, all the rest of it. And the vast amount of money flowing into the NFL is a different thing than, you know, even the NHL and the NBA, let alone the Argos and Toronto FC or even the Blue Jays. You know, the NFL is just a different stratosphere when it comes to global sports. But this is a big deal. I mean, you know, you look at putting together a $15 billion company. You know, Rogers bought Shaw not that long ago for $26 billion. So it's close to that, and they bought a huge telecom company when it comes to Shaw. So it's hard to think of a bigger media sports deal that's been put together.
So essentially, Rogers just added the Raptors, the Leafs, TFC, the Argos to the Blue Jays, as you said, and Rogers Center. They also have holdings in the Oilers and the Canucks. That would seem to me to spell and scream one word: monopoly. Is that allowed?
Yeah, unless someone complains to the Competition Bureau, yeah, it is allowed because technically each of the teams are in different leagues, and there's competition within those leagues. So it'll boil down to how open they are with selling the broadcast rights to those teams to other people other than themselves. And Bell built into this deal a 20-year agreement to have NHL and Raptors and Argos and TFC rights for 20 years. So Rogers still has to negotiate because they have this deal with Bell, who has TSN, to broadcast or to come to a broadcast arrangement to air those games with something other than Sportsnet.
So then the question is, why would Bell even do this? Why would they make this deal considering that they had, I think, capital coming in, or they could bring in capital by selling their rights, and now they've lost control, or at least given away control to the broadcasting rights to two major teams in the Leafs and the Raptors?
So it's a Bay Street shareholder story. Mm-hmm. So Bell's share price has been languishing for a little while, and they've been increasing their dividend that they pay to those shareholders over the years. but they were getting to a point where it looked like they were hitting the ceiling about how they can increase that dividend. And then at that point, the shareholders revolt. And then the company leadership is in trouble. So by making this deal and bringing in $4.7 billion, they can go ahead and increase that dividend for quite some time, because that is a lot of money.
It's a tremendous amount of money, but I thought that owning teams like the Leafs was seen as a crown jewel.
It was. It depends on the leadership, really, because Rogers sees it that way for sure. They see it as definitely a growing business and something they want to be in. Bell sees it as non-core. So the core to them is cell phones, internet plans, making sure the Canadians are connected. Sports and content, non-core. Essentially, they still own Bell Media, they still own Sportsnet, they still own CTV. So that part is, as far as I know, not going anywhere. But they considered the sports ownership as non-core because they also didn't own 100% of it, and they weren't prepared to buy out Rogers, where Rogers was prepared to buy out them. And at this point in their time, their CEO Mirko Bibic is, you can even boil it down to CEO personalities. George Cope, the prior CEO. 6'9", played college ball, loved the Raptors.
Big sports fan.
And so he did the deal back in the day to buy Rogers, or to buy MLSE with Rogers. This was a couple of CEOs ago when they put MLSE together with Mr. Tenenbaum. The other co-owner is still there. So there was, that was done years ago because they thought they, basically make money together. And Rogers was run at the time by a non-family member. Nadir Mohammed was the CEO at the time.
And he was a sports fan.
He was a sports fan, but he was also a pragmatist as well. So at the time when that happened, I thought that was highly unusual because Ted Rogers himself, and I've actually interviewed Ted a couple of times over the years, Ted hated Bell. Hated Bell with an unrivaled passion. His goal in life was to beat Bell Canada with Rogers, and that's what he spent his life doing, building up a cable company, then a telecom company that would rival Bell. And I also talked to Edward, well before I came here, but when I was still covering that industry. And Edward told me in a conversation once that if Ted were alive, never would have gotten get in bed with Bell. He wanted, Ted always wanted to own control of things that he had. Ted gave speeches to universities saying own control. So even though Rogers is a widely traded public company, the family owns the majority of the voting shares. So Ted always wanted to own control and did not want to co-own things with Bell, even though they did around the edges with Dome Productions and some other things. Edward told me long ago that that Ted would never have made that deal, and that he had in the back of his mind, and this is 10 years ago now, to eventually bring it all under the Rogers umbrella.
Well, because I remember, working at Sportsnet at the time, and I think there was this coming together of Sportsnet and TSN for the Vancouver Olympics.
Right.
And that's where the phrase unholy alliance came from. And it's like, whoa, I can't believe I'm actually sitting beside a TSN employee. And at Sportsnet, we were brought up, I'll say, to despise TSN.
Yeah.
I don't know if TSN ever thought that about us because they were always the big boys. They were always the older brothers,
the
right?
cock of the walk.
Yeah, they were number one all the time, right? And of course, so then when 12 years ago, when this Bell and Rogers and MLSE kind of came together, it was like, are you kidding me? How is this going to work? Two figures you just said there that I need to get a little deeper into. I will start with Edward Rogers. Wasn't it only a couple of years ago that he was kind of kicked out of the family?
Yeah.
How does he end up with making the ability to make all of these decisions and pull off such a big transaction?
So there's a whole story there that you can go down. We could probably talk for a couple hours on that. And Alexander Podzaski has a great book on what happened there. Where it looked as though Edward was going to lose control and lose his guy as CEO because he wanted to fire a certain CEO. Certain other board members revolted and reinstated the CEO. But when it comes down to it, what Edward is in control of is the family trust. And the family trust is separate from the company itself. And the family trust owns the actual the voting shares for Rogers. So the family trust owns control, and Edward is in charge of that family trust. And he's also executive chairman of Rogers Communications. So Edward Rogers controls that company and what it does on just about any level he wants, because the family, he's part of that family that owns control. And in the past year, I think his two sisters who moved against him to try and move him out, and his choice of CEO out a few years ago, they've now left the company.
He paid him off. He paid him off.
He gave them some money, is what I've heard. I'm not going to. It's a lot of rumors and it's a lot of big dollars, but his two sisters are now, they're not a part of the family trust or part of the company, so he is in control.
I wonder if they saw this company and say, you know what, enough of this. We want no part of this. Cash me out. I'm out of here.
It very, very well could be.
Okay, Larry Tannenbaum, where does he sit in this? I mean, very well known, certainly a guy that became, I mean, I think everyone's known about him because he's always been front and center with the Raptors, and now with the bringing in of the WNBA, he is, again, really front and center, has this Kilmer group. What's his association with this crazy, not alliance anymore, but this group?
So that's hard to know. I've met Mr. Tannenbaum one time just to say hello to him at an industry event. So that's hard to know. But he does have there's a deadline to a deal coming up in 2026 where Rogers has the option to buy him out completely. I find it interesting that he launched the WNBA team outside of MLSE on his own. So perhaps he's building something else on the side. He's an older gentleman. He could be doing some estate planning and thinking he's going to get out. So it's really hard to say. But I've dug into what some of the Bay Street folks have been saying about this deal, and the assumption is because Rogers paid for or is paying for this 37.5% of MLSE that Bell owns, and they've told them that they're not going to bring in any more debt onto the company. That means Rogers most likely has other investors on the sidelines ready to go. So they will complete this transaction, make MLSE 1, own control of it, and then either make a public offering, so you'd have a separate company. It would be Rogers MLSE trading on the stock exchange, or it would be spun off into a private company but majority owned by Rogers with other private investors in, and that could be Mr. Tannenbaum. But you can't really say at this point because they're not talking. Well,
because those two don't get along. I don't believe, or they don't see things on the same path.
Yeah, that I really don't know.
Right? It seems like there's been distance between Mr. Tannenbaum and Mr. Rogers over the years.
It does seem that way, but I really can't tell from my perch here. Yeah.
So okay, and then now let's get into how this is going to affect everyone here. First of all, how will this affect the viewers? You got streaming. Like, we're watching games on television. We're watching it on radio. We're watching on a streaming basis as well, too. I'm watching more stuff on my phone than I've ever watched, and I never thought I ever would. How will this deal affect the general person that loves to watch sports?
You're going to have to chase games around. If you want to see all the games for all the teams that you like, there's a lot of platforms you're going to have to download and pay for. You and I talked about this recently. If you're a local Buffalo Sabres fan and want to see their 25 local market games, as long as you live from Stony Creek to Niagara Falls, you'd have to go to Fubo, which is a soccer app. But they've bought the local rights from the Sabres. Once you move beyond Stony Creek, you're in Leafs territory. You can't get it on Fubo. So you can get it. I don't know how you would get it, but it's going to fragment more and more and more. You look at the recent NBA deal. After this upcoming season, it switches over, so you'll have to chase NBA games on, if you're in the States anyway, on ABC, ESPN, NBC, Peacock,
TNT.
But TNT is out after this coming season.
Yeah, they're gone.
And it's hard on the fan to want to know where to go, because you used to be able to turn on a channel, and back in the day, you knew where Hockey Night in Canada was all the time. You knew where the game of the week was. You knew where Monday Night Football was, and Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football is relatively new. It's on Amazon in the States. It's on Amazon here, but it's also on TSN here.
Yes.
Because of the different rights here. So you almost have to have a spreadsheet going to figure out where your favorite teams are going to be.
So essentially, you're telling me this is now turned into what I think most people are experiencing right now, that like watching conventional TV in a sense. Sorry, shouldn't say conventional TV shows and miniseries, is that you've got to have, Netflix, and you have to have Crave, and you have to have Paramount, and you have to have Amazon. And these are all things I look at myself, because I'm like everyone else. I mean, outside of my sports life, I do like to watch a little entertainment, but I do look at my bank account every month and I see $9.99, $13.99, like it's all coming out on top of me having an actual Bell 5 bill as well too.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been making this comment for a number of years now, but I'm actually looking back fondly on the days where I paid the cable company just $75 a month to get all the content I wanted.
Everything.
But now the content has exploded and the fragmentation has happened, and so you have to pay that cable amount and your internet amount and all of the extra streamers. Back when Netflix sort of first came out as a streamer, you could go there and watch, one of my favorite movies, The Godfather Part 2, used to be on Netflix. Well, the owners said, well, we're starting our own service. So now if you want to watch The Godfather, it's not on Netflix, it's on Paramount. So you got to subscribe to Paramount. And the same thing is happening in the sports world. And, Apple and Amazon are going to make big pushes into sports. They're already starting at Amazon, and Apple has Major League Baseball.
Yes.
But more and more of that is coming because most people tend to watch it live, so they watch all the ads. And if you're looking at a global market rather than a U.S. or Canada or just North American market, the money's big. The money is real big.
Is that why these companies want to get into sports? Is because unlike, I can watch Sopranos anytime I want.
Yep.
But sports is now, it's immediate. It's, I know me personally, I have to watch it.
Yeah, that's it. Like that's one of the few, like people watch sports, news, award shows, and reality shows live. Those are the four things that companies are still investing pretty heavily in, because that's the stuff that's in the now that you want to know, that you tend not to DVR or tend not to record or watch later or something like that. If you want to see what's going on right now, if you want to see who won the game, you're watching the game. And that's the challenge of it. Now, it's not all sunny days though. Mm-hmm. There have been some markets in the U.S. where the regional sports networks have gone out of business. Bally Sports went bankrupt, and you've seen some teams going, "Geez, we're losing a lot of fans because they're not able to watch us because they can't afford this streaming and this streaming and this streaming to try and chase the games down." So you've seen, the Phoenix Suns, the Phoenix Mercury, the Portland Trailblazers, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Utah Jazz have all made deals with their local broadcaster to have a package of games for free. Mm-hmm. That people can turn on their TV, see it over the air, because still 15% of Americans watch free over the air TV. It's way lower in Canada. But that way you can get the 20% of people who are quite low income to still be fans of your team because they can see it for free and they don't have to buy all these apps and stuff that you were talking about.
Do you think that there's an opportunity or a chance where at the end of the day fans will revolt and say, okay, enough already? Because, and the only reason why I throw that out is the area that we live in have been, I would say, because I watch a lot of European sports, Formula One and the Premiership soccer is something I focus on a lot.
Well, it's your job. I'm glad you're watching all that.
But I do, but I have talked to people that live there, and they say, you guys are so lucky, because for years and years and years, they've been paying for games and paying for subscriberships. Whereas we here, especially in Toronto, you're used to seeing every single Toronto Maple Leafs game for free, for the most part. And that may not be the case any longer.
Well, no, and honestly, it may seem like it's free, but you still have to pay for Sportsnet or TSN. You get some on CBC on Saturday nights, but if you're still paying for Sportsnet and TSN. It's not exactly free. It's cheaper than having to buy a bunch of other apps. But the only free games are those ones that air on CBC, the Hockey Night in Canada games. Everything else it comes through a subscription service.
but I feel like we kind of pay it, and it's for other things as well too. So I feel like I'm not directly paying. I think that's the mentality for a lot of people.
If you've had a cable bill for most of your life, you know, you're kind of, oh yeah, you know, I can see the Leafs, I can see the Grey Cups for you know, for no extra charge. But if you haven't had a cable bill for most of your life, which is a lot of people younger than us, they'll never see the Argos or the Leafs. You know, my son is 26. You know, counts himself as a Raptors fan. I don't think he's ever watched a game front to back, but he knows the team and he knows exactly what's going on because he sees House of Highlights on Instagram, or he sees whatever it is on TikTok. So he sees all the highlights, but doesn't watch that many games. And that's a challenge for these any media company, any content owner, is to break through that barrier and get them to watch a little bit more long form so that they can see the advertisements that are paying bills.
Let's move from the sports consumer to the sports journalist. How does this change? How does a deal like this, again, which is kind of, I'm gonna start calling it the unholy monopoly. Right? How will that affect sports journalism from a standpoint?
So you can't really say there's been much change yet, and I really don't think there will be. Because they still want to be known as open to other journalists. They still want to have whatever journalist is, whether it's us, whether it's local newspapers that are still in Toronto. They still want to have those columnist relationships because they know those are valuable. But it did give me pause that when they announced this gigantic deal, that it was just Edward Rogers, Tony Staffieri, and Ron MacLean in a room.
Oh, yes.
There was no press conference. There was no questions from the audience. There was no, bring the journalists into the room and let them throw questions at you. There was none of that. So that's a little disconcerting to me, I would say. Especially coming from CHCH, where we send, our reporters into Toronto often to cover the Raptors, to cover the Leafs, because we consider those sort of part of our big local area, local teams. But I don't think you'll ever see them just, we're going to have stuff, you're only going to make games and players available just for Rogers folks. What you will see, though, probably is, those specials, that they do with players, or those preseason ones where they do the Hard Knocks, I think it is.
Yep.
Those style of things will probably 100% be on City and Sportsnet.
But to me, that's inside access that other people are not going to have.
But other companies have paid for that, though. HBO has paid for it in the States, and Bell has done it. With certain teams, even though they don't own 100%. But you'll see most. I think you'll see most of that original stuff. Will definitely get to Sportsnet and City.
I'm just concerned. I'm concerned from a reporting and a journalistic standpoint that there's a certain control the message. We're all partners. Sort of mindset that it's going to, they're going to say all the right things now, that, and the deal isn't been officially done. But I could see as time goes on. I remember being at Sportsnet when Rogers first bought Sportsnet, and everything was rosy. And there was an announcer that I will not name at this point that was doing the nightly highlight shows, and the Blue Jays were going through a real tough time, and he called them out a number of times and said a couple of things, and he ended up getting suspended.
Yeah.
He ended up getting suspended, and a letter came to us, all the staff members, basically explaining that we're partners. It's the first time in my life being in the business where I started to learn the word partnership. So I was like, wow, well, how are we going to tell the story? Like if so-and-so, the third baseman, makes a brutal play, well, we have to kind of say, how do we word it all?
Well, let's hope not, because that would really impact the broadcast, right?
Right.
But
we see it on the broadcast anyway, right?
Yeah.
I love Dan Schulman, best in the business. I've said that for years and years. But you watch a Blue Jays game, and not only is it a Blue Jays game, it's like a sale going on. Like there's like, the hot dogs. Come to the entertainment center. Like, I feel sorry for the broadcaster because now they have to do all this, and every segment is sponsored by so and so.
Yeah.
And we come from an era where we didn't have have to broadcast that way.
We remember when there were no ads on the boards.
Yeah.
nice, clean, white hockey boards.
Yes. It was a beautiful thing, right? Not every segment was the so-and-so, the power play sponsored by Fortinos, right? Like it's...
But that's just it. You know, that advertising, those subscriptions, all of that pays for Austin Matthews' salary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's some big dollars there. You know, so all of that is what it's just one big rolling ball of money, right? It's very lucrative for a lot of people, and it's very expensive for those who want to go to the game. You know, $20 beers, and you know, people complain about it all the time, but they still fill that stadium.
I know.
You know, and so until people start going, I'm not going anymore. I can't stand it. You know, I can't stand the traffic. I can't stand the cost. You know, it takes too long to get there. It's too much money for, you know, if I want to buy, you know, a hot dog and a beer. That's when they'll have to, you know, change tack maybe a little bit. Depends, you know, the impact on subscriptions as well. You know, there's a reason why, you know, just with the Blue Jays, Rogers, you know, you can see most of the games on the main sports nets, but a few games of the year go on Sportsnet 1 or Sportsnet 360. And that's to keep the subscriber levels up on both of those brands, even though they don't generally air. They air a bunch of stuff, wrestling and whatnot. Yep. So they put some of those games, and they do it with the Raptors and as well.
Raptors especially.
You know, so that's to keep those subscribers up for those extra brands. So if you're paying the $20 a month for Sportsnet, if you want to watch all the Raptors games, you're going to pay another $5 for Sportsnet 1 or whatever the price is. I'm not, you know, I don't know what the price is.
No, I hear you. And and again, it just keep pay. I just wonder if there's going to be some type of revolt from the fans at some point, because it's weird, because they're kind of telling me watch, but then they're also kind of telling me come to the ball yard, come to the game, right? And I'm at the point right now where I almost am wondering. Look, there's nothing like being at a live event. There's a flavor. There's the fans. When things get, you know, a pressure situation, you feel it in your bones. But boy, the presentation on television nowadays is so good.
It really is.
The amount of cameras that are at ball games now, they capture so many things. And in fact, when you're watching on TV, you capture more than when you're sitting in your seat. Friends have told me, like, well, didn't you see so-and-so? And I know, I was at the game, right? And they're like, oh yeah, they showed this guy who was running around with underwear on. And it's like, well, I didn't see that, right? Because I was at the game or whatever the case was, right?
Yeah.
So I find it's like, I don't know where the more important thing is right now, or how Rogers will certainly approach that. Here's my final question to you on this. Is there a world where Rogers says, we're going to sell all of this now?
Like sell it to some, like just
sell it.
Get out of it?
Get out.
I guess everything's possible, but I don't see that. Because if you think about what it always boils down to, it boils down to shareholder value. And what brings the most shareholder value to Rogers is selling cell phones and cell phone plans and internet plans for your home. That what brings the biggest money. So if they can own all of these sports teams and these stadiums and plaster the Rogers name everywhere, that's why they own these things, is to be, hey, Rogers owns the Leafs, you know. I love the Leafs. Is that going to make you buy a Rogers cell phone over a Bell phone? Maybe. You know, if the prices are the same, maybe that's what leans in your way. And even going back to when Ted bought the Blue Jays, that wasn't really Ted's idea. Ted was not a sports guy. Ted played a little tennis, but he didn't really know the sports world. That just wasn't his thing. So his people brought it to him, including Edward, to say, you know, the team is for sale. I think we should buy it. You know, we'll buy the stadium. We'll call it the Rogers Center. And Ted's question to them, and I found this out from talking to them at the time when I was a journalist covering it, was, will it help me sell more cell phones? And they said, hell yeah. So they said, okay. And they spent $220 million of not even their money on the Blue Jays, because they got that as a break fee from a different deal that fell apart.
And the building didn't cost them any money. I thought wasn't it like a penny or something like that?
Oh yeah, the building was maybe $25 million. Yeah, it was a building that cost $600 million to build.
I got one more for you here. What about the individual fan? Not everyone is a fan of the Raptors. They're all the teams, though. But like, we were talking about, we're here about salary cap and stuff like that. And, is there not going to be some kind of business? Because before it was all up to the general manager he's got a certain amount of cap space and he spent. Now, is there going to be, do you feel that there will be some type of influences, we'll say, upon general managers and managers to do different things?
Boy, that's
from the top.
That's really hard to say, because I think usually when you run a business, even when you have all these things together, they do have their own silos. There's some certain revenue and profit and loss that the Argos have to hit, and the TFC has to hit, and the Blue Jays have to hit, and the Leafs have to hit, and the Raptors have to hit. So they do have their silos where they each have to make money. So there are decisions made based on what's good for that team, that fan base, that company, that business, that business part of the company. But the person this all boils down to is the person you and I both know is Keith Pelly. He's going to be the guy in charge. He was the guy who brought the Rogers NHL deal over. He was in charge. You mentioned the Olympic Consortium. He was in charge of that back in the day. Keith has a really good way of building relationships, partnerships. And he's been quite good at that over the years. There's one thing he's
good at spending money too.
Yes, he is, but it's not his money, and he's acting for others. But the one thing that the one thing we didn't talk about that this deal I think shows is that Rogers spending $4.7 billion to control MLSE means to me that when the 25-26 NHL deal TV NHL deal is over, that's going to somebody else. That's going to Apple, that's going to Amazon, that's definitely going to somebody else, because they're not going to pony up another $5.2 billion for another 12-year deal, a deal which they've lost money on. So there's a big hullabaloo that's going to happen at the probably going into that. We'll know well in advance before the end of not this season, but the next NHL season, where it's going to go. And Rogers has decided, we're going to make money off the teams, not the broadcast deal. They'll still have some games on Sportsnet, probably a lot of games on Sportsnet, maybe some on City. I don't know what they'll do with HockeyNet in Canada and CBC. That's to be determined. But if I'm looking at it holistically like I am, I'm saying Apple or Amazon gets the next NHL deal.
Not Bell?
No.
They don't get back into it?
Too much money.
This has been fun. The business of sports is something I've always enjoyed. That's why I've always enjoyed Bob McCown. Bob McCown was really good at talking about the business of sports. He could tell you, who wore what number and who scored what and whose averages, who averaged what points per game. But he could also talk about this business of sports, because it's becoming a reality that sports, we hear it all the time, right? Yeah. Sports is a business, right? Like players, right down to the players, that sports is a business.
It is.
And it is a reality right now. And it just even a decade ago, things have changed so much to where we are right now. And with a deal like this, the future is to be determined.
Yep.
And I'm excited in some ways to see where it goes. I'm also fearful a little bit as an old guy, right, that knew how things used to be, right? Yeah. So to have you come in and sort of break it down the way you have on sort of layman terms, really appreciate that. And I think our people that watch our podcast really appreciate it, because I think there's a lot of confusion for a lot of people.
It is, and I wish I could clear up some of the confusion. And
I think you have.
And but it is going to get more fragmented, and you're going to have to chase some things around. But yeah, I'm happy to be here, Bubs, and thanks for the invite.
Well, the next time there's a $4.7 billion deal, can you come in?
No problem.
All right, thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. That's your Sportsline podcast for the day, and we're done for the day. And as you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports with those who are in the know. If you do want to join in the fun or promote an athlete, team, or event, we do want to hear from you. Please hit the thumbs up, 5-star, and subscribe button so you'll catch all the informative content CHCH have to offer. For the fine folks that make the Sportsline podcast possible, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.